So you want to create this ground wave deformation on a video? Okay, let's do it. Maybe you have seen this combination of techniques used in my recent works like this, and even in a less famous movie like this. Okay, let's start. Let's open up Blender. I'm using version 2.91. Select the cube and delete it, and already save your project wherever you want. Safety first. Check that we are using 25 FPS, and in the render properties, check that we are using Eevee, and jump in this plus button. Search for VFX motion tracking. Expand a bit. Open your image sequence. In the description of this video, I leave you the link where you can download this image sequence. Check that there are not blank frames. Sometimes it happens. Just select the first frame. If you create your own video with your phone, just make sure that it has enough contrast for helping the tracking, and don't make it too much shaked. Jump here. Check that the start frame is starting from 0, not from 1. And change the start frame for the animation to 0. Now click on set scene frames. Now the duration of the animation is set to the duration of my video. Click on prefetch to increase the performance of the video player. Zoom out a bit. Make sure that we are at frame 0, so you can click on this button and change this to perspective. Now click on detect features. Expand this track menu and click on track markers. This will track all the markers forward. Cool. We are at the end of the animation now. We're going to click again on detect features, and this time we're going to click on the second button here that will track the markers backwards. Poof! Cool. Now we're going to go something in the middle of the animation. I'm in frame 130, and again detect features. Track markers forward. Go again in frame 130 and track markers backwards this time. Oop, easy. Blender is doing the work for us. You should not be afraid of motion tracking. Go on Solve panel, click on keyframe and change this to focal length K1, K2. Expand this a bit. Now we see that all the markers are tracked, but there are some of them that contains error. We want Blender to find these markers with errors so that we can delete them. So we're going to change this on select, and we're going to type maximum error allowed of 0.001. Make sure that we are at the starting frame and click on filter tracks. So put the mouse here, click on X and delete tracks. Jump to the end of the animation, click again on filter tracks, X and delete. Jump something around here, again filter tracks, X, delete. Click maybe here, filter tracks, X, delete. We're gonna repeat this operation for just something like every 20 frames. When Blender says to you that he's starting to find 0 problematic tracks, is a good news, because it means that we are ready for solving the camera. And so we can click on Solve Camera Motion. This will take some seconds. At the end of this operation, if you get a lower result than 1, then it's good. Let's see. 0.29, yoo-hoo! Incredible, super incredible, fantastic. I've never seen such a good result in the history of motion tracking in the world. Okay, let's make some space here. Maybe here too. Now I'm gonna search for the Set as Background button, and then click on Setup Tracking Scene. As you can see, something appear in our 3D view. But if you scroll to the animation, you can see that the ground is not aligned with our floor. Don't worry. Now we're going to do something to fix this. We're going to choose one of these tracks, maybe this guy here. Hello. Click it and set as origin. Oh, our cube is back again. Say goodbye, little cube, and sorry. Scale this ground a bit. Switch to the layout window. Now we can start doing some stuff. In this view, let's press numpad 0 to switch to the camera view. And in this view, I'm going to press numpad 7 for having the top view. Select the camera and go on the setting of the camera. Find the background images panel and increase the opacity to 1. Now we can uncheck the render and distort option. You can use it, but for this tutorial we just don't, because it makes things more complicated. Select the ground and put it inside the foreground collection, and select the background collection and delete it. Now go in this icon, click it, find the background VR layer and just delete it. If you scroll to the animation now, you can see that our ground is still not perfectly aligned with the floor. So click here and activate the motion tracking so we can see the motion tracking tracks on the ground. Click on the ground, maybe scale it a bit. You can go back on the motion tracking window and find the 3 tracks that are active on the ground. I recommend you that must be 3 active tracks, not the ones that are not moving. So select them 3 and click on floor. And now go back on the layout window. Our ground is perfectly sticking on the floor. You can scroll the animation to see it. Let's scale it a bit. Press G and the X to move it on along the X axis. We can move it a bit on the Y axis too. I'm trying to use this line as a reference for rotating on Z axis and align it. Press R, Z and rotate until these 2 lines are aligned perfectly. Now just go on scaling and moving this mesh until you get something like this. Switch to solid shade mode. Okay, we can turn off the tracking points. Play the animation to give a check. If you press Ctrl Space, we can toggle full screen. Alright, it's going pretty damn good. Yeah, in the borders of the frame, there will be always some strange thing happening. You can see that there is a little bit of weirdness happening. It's due to the distortion of the lens. We're gonna speak maybe in another tutorial about this. Okay, go here, activate the motion tracking tracks. We're gonna give a general look at what's going on here. Press F12 to give a check at the render. As you can see, it's all gray. We need to go in the render properties, scroll down to film panel and activate the transparent. Press F12 again. And as you can see now, we have our composition. Okay, now we're gonna do something. Switch this to compositor window. Press Ctrl Space to activate full screen. There's a lot of stuff that we don't need. This one, select it and delete. Delete this one too. Connect these 2. We can delete these 2. Connect image to the image in the first place. And now press F12 again. Perfect. We just delete the usual stuff. Yeah, switch back to the 3D viewport. Can click here and turn off the motion tracking. Press tab and right click, subdivide again and again and again and again and again. Press tab to exit edit mode. Go on object, change move. Press tab again to enter edit mode. We can switch this window to UV editor. Make sure that we are in frame 100. Put the mouse here, right click, project from view. We got our UVs. Press tab to exit edit mode. Go on the shader panel to give this ground a new material and rename it ground. And switch this window to shader editor. Go to edit, preferences, add-ons, and type here Wrangler. We need to activate this node Wrangler. You will see why now. Save preferences, close this. Now click on principal BSDF and this will appear. Press G to move them. Click on open and search for the single image of frame 100. Click on open. We can delete these 2 nodes. If you go on the UV editor, search for the image that we loaded in the shader. Switch this to material preview and ta-da! Our texture is projected on the mesh. It's pretty damn good aligned with our original footage. We just need to fix the corner because it was outside the frame. Let's press tab to enter edit mode and click outside the mesh to deselect everything. Now we're gonna press C to use the circular selection. With the mouse wheel you can increase the size of the tool and literally paint on the vertex to select all the vertex that stay outside the frame. Expand it a bit. In the UV editor, press G to move them inside the image. You can even scale them a little bit. Make sure that they are aligned with the texture in our mesh. An important note, at this point you may be asking yourself, why did he choose exactly the texture from frame 100? Well, frame 100 is something around the middle of the animation and the movement of the camera. If I would have chosen a texture from the beginning of the animation, we would have had a texture very low quality when the camera will zoom in something around in the end of the animation, and you will see all the giant pixel on it. On the contrary, if I would have chosen a texture from the end part of the animation, we would have had a lot of problem with the UV projection because the mesh is almost entirely cut out of the frame. Select ground. Expand this. Go on Modifier tab and add a wave modifier. As you can see, we applied a set of waves in our mesh, and now we're gonna play a little bit with the settings of this wave. Let's switch this to 3D viewport. We're gonna turn off cyclic because we just want one wave. Let's expand the time panel and decrease the speed on 2.02 maybe, something like this. I see a lot of reflection, so we can increase the roughness to 1. We can decrease the speed to 0.025. You will read 0.03, but it is actually 0.025. The offset determines when the wave will start, so we're gonna set it on 15, so the wave will start on the 15th frame. Yeah, it started looking good. Press F12 to see what's going on. Alright, as you can see, our mesh is very dark and has very hard edges. Don't worry, we're gonna fix everything. Ctrl space to maximize this window and switch this to compositor. Now we want to see our render in the background behind the nodes. So in this panel you have to activate backdrop. Actually, Ctrl space. First of all, I want to click on the light, go on the light setting and decrease the power of the light. Switch this to rendered. Go again in the light settings and switch the light on sun. We're gonna decrease the power to something like 3.030, and we're gonna put an angle of 0.1. Press numpad 1. We have to rotate this light a little bit to match the real light, even to make the shadow a little less dark, like this, something like this. Yeah. Looking good. Select the ground now, go on this window and switch it to shader editor. Jump here and we're gonna deselect outline and even 3D cursor, and deselect even origins because we want to clearly see our borders. We have to fix them now. We're gonna use a mask to blur the borders with the original footage. Actually, before doing this, we need to fix this ugly peak that there is in the wave. We're gonna do it easily, playing with the setting of the wave. First of all, we're gonna set fall off for the wave. The fall off is the maximum distance that the wave will reach. We're gonna choose a fall off of 3.7. Set the narrowness something like, don't go too much hard on the narrowness. We're gonna set something like something smooth, maybe 3.9. Yeah. After many tests, I found out that these combinations of settings works pretty good if you want to copy and paste. I will not say anybody that you just copy and paste settings, don't worry. Go to frame 100. I will do a trick to fix the ugly peak that you can see in the starting point of the wave. Put the mouse on height values and press I to add a keyframe. Jump to the start of the animation, put the mouse here and type 0. And then press I to add another keyframe. Super cool! So now you can press F12 to have a test render and see what's going on. Cool! And now comes the part in which we blur the edges of the mesh. So we're going to play a little bit with the shadings. Click on object here, set origin, origin to center of mass surface. Click again on object, snap, cursor to selected, because we want to add another plane mesh here that is gonna act as a reference for our mask. Scale it a bit, rename it mask, move it into the foreground collection, And we're gonna click on this icon because we don't want this mesh to be visible in the rendering. If you don't see these icons here, you have to click on this button and activate these two. And so you will see the icons now. Go on the object properties, viewport display, and display as wire so we can see through it. Click on the ground mesh, go on the shader editor, move this a bit, and add a transparent BSDF. We're going to use a mix shader and combine them two because we want now to say to Blender that all the black parts of the mask are going to be transparent. Make sure that the principle is in the second place. Shift A, add a gradient texture. It's going to act as a controller for our mask. Move this a bit. Make this a quadratic sphere so that we're going to have a circular mask. Plug the color into the factor, hold Ctrl Shift and click on gradient texture. Link the object to the vector and choose a mask as a reference for our texture coordinates. Ctrl space, come here. We want to see what's going on with our mask, so we're gonna hold Ctrl Shift and click on gradient texture. Now, in this window you can see in real time what's going on with our mask only. Switch this to rendered. Cool. This is the viewer node. Whatever we do is showing us only the mask. When you want to see the render, you just Ctrl Shift on mix shader. Mask, render. Mask, right? So move this viewer a little bit. Shift A and add a color ramp. Plug it in the middle of these two. This color ramp is useful to control and modify the mask as we want. You can play a little bit with it to see the changes. Actually, click on the mask mesh and scale it a bit until you see the shades. You can even scale it using this setting, but I prefer to directly scale the mesh because it's faster and even more precise. So make it more or less the size of the ground. Click again on the ground. Why nothing is changing here? Alright, because we have to Ctrl Shift and click on the color ramp to see the mask changing. Now you can see in real time the changes. Move this a little bit. Ctrl Shift, click here. We want to activate transparency, so go on the material settings, blend mode, choose the alpha hashed. It's too much transparent, so you're gonna play with the color ramp a little bit. Move this to the left, and you can see that we have a nice blending between the CGI part and the footage. Click here and turn off all the voices. I just want to see the mesh now. Go on playing with this color ramp until you get something like this. You can see that if you move too much to the right, the mesh becomes somehow transparent. F12, give a test render. Medium, cool, but we can do better. Let's see a render in the starting of the animation. Pretty quite cool. Now we're gonna play a little bit again with the light. Go on the light settings and decrease the strength on 2.650 maybe. F12. Medium cool again. Let's see the beginning. Yeah, look, there is a little bit of gray zone again that you can spot here, but you don't worry. Switch this window to compositor. The purpose of this part of the work is to blend the colors between the CGI and the original footage. So, Shift A to add a color balance. Increase the gamma a little bit, just a little bit. Nice. F12 again to give a test render. There is a problem here. You can see that is too much transparent our ground. We can easily fix this by playing a little bit with the color ramp. So just switch this window to the shader editor again. Find the frames in which you can see the transparency problem. We're gonna grab the white cursor of the color ramp and just move a little bit to the left. And you can see that now we increase the opacity of the mask. Check the animation. It's everything alright. I'm gonna switch this window to compositor. Shift A to add a brightness and contrast node and plug it in the middle of these two. Let's decrease the brightness to something like minus 1.07. Yeah, almost. We can do a last thing. Select the light, go here and press numpad 1 and just rotate it a little bit again until you see that the color matches perfectly. F12, test render. Cool. We are done. And now it's time to export everything. So we're gonna go in the render properties. That's okay. Let's go to the output properties. Here is everything okay. Choose the folder where to save, give it a name. About the format, I usually export everything in PNG sequence or OpenEXR because I always do a final compositing in After Effects. But in this tutorial we can export directly in video format just to make things easy and to demonstrate that sometimes you just can do everything directly in Blender. So we're gonna choose all the best settings for the videos. FFmpeg video with a container of MPEG-4, H264 perceptual losses, slowest encoding. Go under render menu and render animation. This is the exact result of the tutorial. Before you go, you may be asking yourself, but I wanted to do the wave F tutorial like you did in your Matrix video the other day, but Blender doesn't let me apply the wave effect on the vertical surface. Okay. Let's suppose you have your own building in the scene. Let's scale it a bit, make it look like a building, give him fancy texture, apply the wave modifier, enter edit mode, subdivide 6 times, see that the wave affects only the roofs. So we're gonna enter edit mode, select all vertices, rotate them by 90 degrees, exit edit mode and rotate the mesh by 90 degrees again. And we have tricked Blender. You can see that the wave now affects the glasses that like we want it. Everything can be done in Blender if we combine solutions. You can even position the wave wherever you want. And that's it. I told you to, don't worry. I'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao.